What libertarianism really means. This is Libertarian View, your source of decentralized and distributed information. Libertarians tend to agree on a wide array of policies and principles. Nonetheless, it's not easy to find consensus on what libertarianism's defining characteristic is or on what distinguishes it from other political theories and systems. Various formulations abound. It is said that libertarianism is about individual rights, property rights, the free market, capitalism, justice, or the non-aggression principle. Not just any of these will do, however. Capitalism and the free market are the base of the libertarian society, but do not encompass all aspects of libertarianism. They are more of a consequence than a definition, and individual rights, justice, and non-aggression all can be seen as derivations of the property rights.
As Murray Rothbard explained, individual rights are property rights,
and justice is just giving someone his due, which depends on what his rights are. The non-aggression principle is also depend on property rights, since what aggression is depends on what our property rights are. If you hit me, it is aggression because I have a property right on my body. If I take from you the apple you possess, this is an aggression only because you own the apple. One cannot identify an act of aggression without implicitly assigning a corresponding property rights to the victim. So capitalism and the free market are too narrow, and justice, individual rights, and non-aggression all boil down to property rights. So, what are property rights then? A property right is simply the exclusive right to control a scarce resource. Property rights specify which persons own, that is, have the right to control various scarce resources in a given region or jurisdiction.
Yet everyone and every political theory advance some theory of property. If the state taxes you, it is implicitly a certain ownership of the funds taken. If the law allows a recipient of a racial discrimination to sue his employer for a sum of money, he is the owner of the money. Even communism, which is often seen as the extreme opposite of capitalism, dictates that the means of production should be owned by the workers' collective. Protection of and respect for property rights is thus not unique to libertarianism. What is distinctive about libertarianism is its view concerning who is the owner of each contestable resource and how to determine this. A system of property rights assigns a particular owner to every scarce resource. These resources obviously include natural resources such as land, fruits of trees, and so on. Objects found in nature are not the only scarce resources, however. Each human actor has controls and is identified as associated with an unique human body, which is also a scarce resource. Both human bodies and non-human scarce resources are desired for use as means by actors in the pursuit of various goals. Accordingly, any political theory or system must assign ownership rights in human bodies as well as in external things. Let us consider first the libertarian property assignment rules with respect to human bodies and the corresponding notion of aggression as it pertains to bodies. Libertarians often vigorously assert the non-aggression principle, as Rothbard put it. The libertarian creed rests upon one central axiom, that no man or group of men may aggress against the person or property of anyone else. This may be called the non-aggression axiom. Aggression is defined as the initiation of the use or threat of physical violence against the person or property of a peaceful individual. Aggression is therefore objectively defined as the violation of property rights, leaving no room for subjectiveness such as microaggressions or slander. In other words, libertarians maintain that the only way to violate rights is by initiating force against a peaceful individual, that is, by committing aggression. However, notice that using force as a response to aggression is not another aggression, because the aggressor is not a peaceful individual. So defensive, restitutive, or retaliatory punitive force is justified. Now, in the case of the body, it is clear what aggression is: invading the borders of someone's body, commonly called battery, or more generally using the body of another without their consent. The very notion of interpersonal aggression presupposes that each person is the owner of his own body. Non-libertarian political philosophies have a different view. Each person has some limited right in his own body, but not complete or exclusive rights. They advocate that the state, commonly used in the name of society, has certain rights in each citizen's body too. This partial slavery is implicit in state actions and laws such as taxation, conscription, and drugs prohibitions. The libertarian says that each person is the full owner of his body. He has the right to control his body, to decide whether or not he ingests narcotics, joins an army, and so on. Libertarians believe in self-ownership. Non-libertarians, usually called statists by libertarians, always advocate some form of slavery. Without property rights, there is always the possibility of conflict over scarce resources. By assigning an owner to each resource, legal systems make possible conflict-free use of resources by establishing visible boundaries that non-owners can avoid. As Professor Hope shown, the assignment of ownership to a given resource must not be random, arbitrary, particularistic, or biased if it's actually to be a property norm that can serve the function of conflict avoidance. Property title has to be assigned to one of competing claimants based on the existence of an objective, intersubjectively ascertainable link between owner and the resource claimed. In the case of one's own body, it is the unique relationship between a person and his body, his direct and immediate control over his body, and the fact that, at least in some sense, a body is a given person and vice versa, constitutes the objective link sufficient to give that person a claim to his body superior to typical third-party claimants. Moreover, any outsider who claims another's body cannot deny this objective link and its special status, since the outsider also necessarily presupposes this in his own case. This is so because in seeking dominion over the other and in asserting ownership over the other's body, he has to presuppose his own ownership of his body. In so doing, the outsider demonstrates that he does place a certain significance on this link, even as he disregards the significance of the other's link to his own body. Libertarianism recognizes that only the self-ownership rule is universalizable and compatible with the goals of peace, cooperation, and conflict avoidance. We recognize that each person is the owner of his own body because, by virtue of his unique link to and connection with his own body, he has a better claim to it than anyone else. Libertarians apply similar reasoning in the case of other scarce resources, namely external objects in the world that, unlike bodies, were at the one point unknown. In the case of bodies, the idea of aggression being impermissible immediately implies self-ownership. In the case of external objects, however, we must identify who the owner is before we can determine what constitutes aggression. As in the case with bodies, humans need to be able to use external objects as means to achieve various ends. Because these things are scarce, there is also the potential for conflict, and as in the case with bodies, libertarians favor assigning property rights so as to permit the peaceful, conflict-free, productive use of such resources. Thus, as in the case with bodies, property is assigned to the person with the best claim or link to a given scarce resource. Unlike human bodies, However, external objects are not parts of one's identity, are not directly controlled by one's will, and they are initially unknown. Here, the libertarian realized that the relevant objective link is appropriation, which means the transformation or embordering of a previously unknown resource, or as Locke puts it, homesteading, the first use or possession of the thing. Under this approach, the first user of a previously unknown thing has a better claim than a second claimant, solely by virtue of his being earlier. This distinction is very important because it differentiates between the right to control and actual control, or more commonly known as ownership and possession. Not always the one controlling an object will be the one that owns the object, and when conflict arrives, we need to know who has the right to decide what to do with the object. The answer to a conflict cannot be whoever has the resource or whoever is able to take it is its owner. Such as a system, far from avoiding conflict, makes conflict unavoidable. More generally, latecomers' claims are inferior to those of prior possessor or claimants who either homesteaded the resource or who can trace their title back to the homesteader or earlier owner. Thus, the libertarian position on property rights is that, in order to permit conflict-free, productive use of scarce resources, property titles to particular resources are assigned to particular owners. As can be seen from the considerations presented above, the property rights is the physical transformation or embordering of the original homesteader or a chain of title traceable by contract back to him. Not only libertarians are civilized. Most people give some weight to some of the above considerations. In their eyes, a person is the owner of his own body, as it can be seen even by the leftist slogan, quote, "My body, my rules." This is a principal distinction between libertarians and non-libertarians. Libertarians are consistently opposed to aggression, defined in terms of invasion of property borders, where property rights are understood to be assigned on basis of prior possession or homesteading and contractual transfer of title. This framework for rights is motivated by the libertarians' consistent and principled valuing of peaceful interaction and cooperation, in short, of civilized behavior. Civilized men feel uneasy at the prospect of violent struggles with others. He has a reluctance to violently clash with others over certain objects because he has empathy with them. Whatever the reason, because of this uneasiness when there is the potential for violent conflict, the civilized man seeks justification for the forceful control of a scarce resource that he desires, but which some other person opposes. Empathy, or whatever spurs men to adopt libertarian ground norms, gives rise to a certain form of uneasiness, which gives rise to ethical action. Civilized man may be defined as he who seeks justification for the use for interpersonal violence when the inevitable need to engage in violence arises for defense of life or property. A civilized man seeks justification. Naturally, since this justification seeking is done by people who are inclined to reason and peace, what they seek are rules that are fair, potentially acceptable to all, grounded in nature of things, and universalizable, and which permit conflict-free use of resources. Libertarian property rights principles emerge as the only candidate that satisfies this criteria. Thus, if a civilized man is he who seeks justification for the use of violence, the libertarian is he who is serious about this endeavor. He has a deep principled innate opposition to violence and an equally deep commitment to peace and cooperation. For the foregoing reasons, libertarianism may be said to be the political philosophy that consistently favors social rules aimed at promoting peace, prosperity, and cooperation. It recognizes that the only rules that satisfy the civilized ground norms are the self-ownership principle and the homesteading principle, applied as consistently as possible. And because the state necessarily commits aggression, the consistent libertarian is opposing aggression, is also anarchist. Thanks for watching. This article is adapted from the What Libertarianism Is in Your Guido Husman and Stefan Kinsella, eds, Property, Freedom and Society. Essay in honor of Hans Hermann Hoppe. An abbreviated version of this article was incorporated into the author's speech, Intellectual Property and Libertarianism, presented at Mises University, 2009.
If you liked this video, don't forget to hit the like button and share this video on your social network. If you want to be notified from other videos, hit the subscribe button and then the bell icon. See you soon!